Emma and Daniel had been married for 15 years, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Manchester, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed perfectly and neighbors waved without knowing each other's names. Yet inside their home, silence lived like a third person, heavy and judgmental, filling every room they walked into. Daniel was a respected financial analyst, calm on the outside but emotionally distant, while Emma, once full of laughter and ambition, now measured her days by the ticking clock in unfinished conversations. And the strange thing was that nothing big had gone wrong. No cheating, no shouting, no broken plates, just a slow emotional starvation, where Daniel stopped asking how her day was and Emma stopped answering even when he did. And on one rainy evening, while Emma cleaned the kitchen, she overheard Daniel on a phone call in the study whispering, "I can't keep living like this. It's destroying me." And her heart froze because those words weren't meant for her ears. And when Daniel noticed her standing there, their eyes met, but neither spoke, because sometimes the most terrifying moments are not arguments, but the quiet realization that something precious is slipping away without making a sound. And if you've ever felt that kind of silence in a relationship, this story might feel uncomfortably familiar. So stay with us and don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will challenge everything you believe about love and marriage. The journal that changed everything. That night, unable to sleep, Emma noticed something unusual on Daniel's side of the bed, a small black notebook she had never seen before, and she knew she shouldn't open it, but curiosity mixed with fear is a powerful force, so she did, and what she read shattered her sense of reality. It wasn't an affair, it wasn't financial trouble, it was worse. Daniel had been writing letters to himself, pages filled with guilt, regret, and a quiet resentment toward the life he felt trapped in. Lines like, "I became a husband before understanding myself," and "Emma deserves someone who can feel." And Emma realized that the man she lived with wasn't heartless. He was emotionally numb, slowly losing himself under the pressure of being strong, responsible, and successful. And suddenly, every ignored message, every canceled dinner, every cold response made a painful kind of sense. Yet one sentence stood out and refused to leave her mind. "If I disappear, maybe she'll finally be free." And Emma closed the journal with trembling hands, because love hurts differently when you understand it too late. And she sat on the floor, crying silently, knowing that confronting him might push him further away, but staying quiet might lose him forever. And if this emotional tension is gripping you already, make sure you subscribe, because this story is only getting deeper and more unsettling. The incident on the highway. 2 days later, Daniel didn't come home on time, and at first, Emma told herself not to overthink it. Late meetings happened, deadlines dragged on, but when she called his phone and it went straight to voicemail, a familiar unease settled in her chest, slow and heavy, like something poisonous spreading through her veins. And as the hours passed, the silence became unbearable. Every tick of the clock louder than the last, until finally, at exactly 11:47 p.m., her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. And in that single second, before she even answered, her heart already knew something was terribly wrong. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, detached. Daniel had been involved in a serious car accident on the M6 highway, his car losing control during a violent storm, hydroplaning across the wet asphalt before crashing into the barrier. And although he had survived, he was being transferred to the hospital for observation. Emma arrived shaking, her clothes soaked from rain she didn't remember walking through. And when the doctor spoke to her, his words sent a chill deeper than fear. "Physically, he's stable, but psychologically, he's withdrawn, almost disconnected." Sitting beside Daniel's hospital bed, watching machines rise and fall with his breathing, Emma felt the crushing weight of realization, how fragile life really was, how quickly unspoken pain could turn into irreversible damage. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, she reached for his hand, desperate for reassurance, but he didn't take it, didn't ask if she was okay, didn't even look at her. Instead, he whispered softly, almost apologetically, "I'm tired of pretending." Those words hurt more than the accident itself, because Emma understood then that this crash wasn't random. It was the result of years of emotional neglect, silent suffering, and feelings left unspoken. And if this moment made your heart heavy, subscribe now, because what happens next will redefine love, sacrifice, and emotional survival. Therapy and unspoken truths. After Daniel was discharged from the hospital, the doctor didn't hesitate before recommending psychological therapy, explaining gently that some wounds don't show up on x-rays. And for the first time in years, Daniel agreed without argument or avoidance, as if the accident had stripped away his last layer of resistance. And Emma joined him, sitting beside him in a quiet therapy room where the walls were painted in neutral tones, meant to calm the mind, but instead amplified the tension between them. Across from them sat the therapist, her calm gaze steady and patient, inviting honesty without judgment, and slowly, painfully, years of suppressed emotions began to surface. Daniel admitted that he had lived most of his life feeling inadequate, never enough as a husband, never strong enough as a man, never truly comfortable in his own skin, and the pressure to provide, to stay composed, to never appear weak had hollowed him out from the inside. Emma, her voice trembling, confessed that she had swallowed her own pain for years, believing that expressing it would only add to Daniel's burden, choosing silence over conflict until silence became distance. In that sterile room, surrounded by quiet and truth, they both realized something terrifying yet freeing. They were not enemies destroying each other, but wounded allies who had forgotten how to communicate. But healing, they learned, isn't linear, and during one particularly intense session, Daniel turned to Emma and said quietly, "I need space not because I don't love you, but because I don't know who I am anymore." Those words cut deeper than anger ever could, because loving someone sometimes means letting them walk away without certainty, without guarantees. And as Emma nodded through tears, she understood that this might be the beginning of healing or the start of goodbye. And if you're emotionally invested right now, subscribe, because the most painful chapter of this story is still ahead. The separation. Daniel moved into a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Leeds, a place with minimal furniture, blank white walls, and an emptiness so loud it made arguments feel merciful by comparison. And every night he lay awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, realizing that silence, once desired, could become a form of punishment. Meanwhile, Emma stayed in the house they had built together, surrounded by framed memories, shared routines, and rooms that still carried Daniel's presence, replaying every moment she had believed love alone would be enough to hold two broken people together. Yet during this painful separation, something unexpected began to happen. Emma slowly started rediscovering parts of herself she had buried years ago, enrolling in a local writing course, filling notebooks with words she once thought no one would ever read, and reconnecting with dreams she had quietly sacrificed in the name of stability and marriage. Daniel, on the other hand, learned that freedom without emotional connection felt hollow, and one night, drunk on loneliness and self-awareness, he opened his laptop and wrote Emma a long email, confessing everything he never knew how to say, but he never pressed send, reading it again and again, because pride is often just fear wearing the disguise of confidence. Weeks passed without contact, each day stretching painfully longer than the last, until one morning Emma received a handwritten letter in the post. No apology, no dramatic promises, just a single line written carefully, almost humbly. "I finally understand what I was running from." Emma held the letter for a long time, unsure whether it represented hope or closure. And if this emotional distance feels painfully real to you, subscribe because the final chapters of this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love. The unexpected choice. Emma didn't reply to Daniel's letter immediately, not because she didn't care, but because for the first time in her life, she understood the power of choosing herself before choosing anyone else. And in that silence, she discovered clarity instead of fear. Months later, when Daniel finally returned, standing at the doorway with familiar eyes but a different stillness about him, Emma didn't rush into his arms the way she once would have. Instead, she met his gaze and asked the question that had been forming quietly inside her. "Are you choosing me, or are you just afraid of being alone?" The question hung between them, heavy and unavoidable, and in that moment, Daniel realized that love without awareness was nothing more than habit, a comfort zone disguised as commitment. He admitted that for years he had confused emotional absence with strength, and that asking for another chance without rebuilding himself would only repeat the same mistakes. Rather than pleading, he stepped back, choosing honesty over desperation, and suggested something radical. They wouldn't restart as husband and wife, but as two individuals relearning how to connect without expectations or emotional dependency. They met for coffee like strangers, talked without defensiveness, listened without interrupting, and slowly rebuilt trust through transparency rather than promises. Emma felt something new, respect for herself and for a man finally willing to do the inner work. The truth about love. A year later, Emma returned, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. New York had changed her, not by making her bigger, but by making her clearer. Her writing had been published, her voice finally heard, and for the first time in her life, she felt whole on her own. Daniel, too, had changed, not through grand success or dramatic gestures, but through quiet self-work, therapy sessions, and long nights of honest reflection, learning that love was not about fixing someone or being needed, but about being emotionally present. When they finally stood face to face again, there was no rush, no desperate embrace, just a calm recognition between two people who had chosen growth over fear. They talked openly, without blame or guilt, and understood a truth that once escaped them. Love doesn't survive because people stay, it survives because people grow, even when that growth risks separation. They chose each other again, not out of habit or loneliness, but out of awareness, respect, and emotional maturity. And the lesson was clear. The strongest relationships are not built on sacrifice alone, but on balance between connection and independence, love and self-worth, togetherness and personal truth. If this story made you reflect on your own relationships, on the silence you tolerate, or the conversations you avoid, then remember this: real love doesn't ask you to disappear to keep it alive. And if stories that challenge your heart and mind matter to you, subscribe to this channel because every story here is meant to leave you wiser than when you started watching. The final test. Just as things between Emma and Daniel began to feel steady again, careful conversations, honest smiles, and a fragile sense of trust, life presented its most unexpected challenge. Emma received an email from a publishing house in New York expressing interest in her writing, followed by a formal offer that turned her long-buried dream into reality.
I can't hold it in anymore.
It was everything she
This
had once
pain is just
convinced
too much.
herself was
I
unrealistic.
feel so lost.
And this time, the decision belonged to her alone. The old version of Emma would have hesitated, worried about what it would mean for her marriage, her responsibilities, and Daniel's feelings. But growth had taught her something different.
I need you to trust me on this.
Self-fulfillment was
How
not
can I,
selfish.
after everything?
When she told Daniel,
Please.
she braced herself for disappointment or quiet resistance, but instead he surprised her. He encouraged her to go, even though the thought of distance unsettled him, because he finally understood that real love doesn't cage ambition, it supports it, even when it's uncomfortable. As Emma prepared to leave, their farewell wasn't dramatic or
Everything
desperate,
okay? You seem
just
worried.
honest,
I'm
filled with
fine, just ready to
unspoken
be there.
fear and
All right, let's
earned
go then.
respect.
Okay.
They both knew this wasn't just a professional opportunity, it was the true test of everything they had rebuilt. If their bond survived time zones, loneliness, and temptation, then it was real. If it didn't, then perhaps love alone had never been enough. When Emma boarded the plane, neither promised forever, and strangely, that made their connection stronger because emotional maturity had replaced control and trust had replaced fear. And as the distance between them grew, so did the question that would define their future. Was their love strong enough to grow independently, or had it only survived when held too tightly together?